people know or believe that monks are like the happiest people, right? People also know the billionaires and the most famous people are sometimes the most depressed. You would never say like a monk is depressed. Like very few people can think of that archetype. A lot of people can find archetypes of famous and quote unquote successful people, famous and rich and people who have won the external game, but they're unhappy. And so it's funny that like people say, I don't want to go to a cave, I don't want to be a monk, and pursue external gain, but the external gain, the archetype is people who are unsuccessful, meaning people who are not at peace with their mind.
So the Callum Johnson Show. On today's episode, we have Danny Miranda. Danny, how you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. And the reason that I said I wanted to get straight into it is because I remember like a year ago, I've been doing the podcast for maybe like close to 18 months at this point. And I remember you were like one of the first people that I looked at that you were like a few steps ahead. And I was just seeing how you executed and how you got to it. And I just had a ton of respect for it. Purely on just this guy gets shit done. Like he's prolific. And that was the word that came to mind when I saw your content. It's just prolific. Like he puts it out. He's not playing. And so for the audience, I'll give some context on you. So obviously you're the host of the Danny Miranda podcast. You guys are a top 1% podcast. You've interviewed the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, Andy Frisella recently, which was pretty sick.
Yeah.
Robert Greene, I saw you did an episode with him recently. Pomp. Like the names go on and on and on. Across fields as well. Like people that you wouldn't even expect. I saw Lisa Rand came on your podcast. Like across the spectrum, right? And to be honest, like observing you, because we've kind of known each other or like spoken since, I don't know, in the last year. And it's not even the guests or the listenership or being a top 1% podcast that I find impressive about you. It was, I remember a period last summer, you were one of the first people I saw that was just relentless, just posting clips every day, like clockwork. And I remember even texting you like, you have like a team or something. I was like, there must be multiple of this guy behind the scenes. You were like, no, just me. I was like, right, this guy gets to it. And so, and you know, actually, I want to tell the audience a story. The first time we spoke on the phone, because I remember, I think I messaged you on Instagram or on Twitter, and I was asking you questions because at the time I had like this target of getting 10,000 listens on my podcast, and you had done it. You had blown way past that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to get the game from this guy. I'll apply it. We'll get there quicker. And I called you and I'm like, how do I get the 10,000 listens? And I remember you said to me, and at the time I was like, what? You said to me, you were like, only do this if you're willing to do it for 10 years. I was like, I didn't really answer the question. And so, you know what I want to ask you? Because I've given the audience the context of how prolific you are, how you put stuff out with just relentless action. On the other hand, you're also like just extremely patient as well with the results. And it reminds me of that Naval quote, which is impatience with actions, but patience with results. And so I always think about the context of the guest. Like how did they come to be like that? And those two forces you rarely see. The person who's relentless is usually not patient. And so the thing that I was like, you know what, when we get Danny in the room, I need to ask him straight away. How did you achieve that balance? Relentless patience. How did that come to be? This episode is brought to you by Free Agency. If you want to take your career to the next level, Free Agency is a company that you should check out. They manage and represent talent in the tech industry, and they provide you with a dedicated talent agent to help you find, engage, and win top of market roles that will maximize your earning potential. No more leaving money on the table. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. Anyway, back to the show.
So I appreciate the intro and the context for this episode and for me. To answer your question, I grew up in New York. All my life, 24 years of my life, I spent in New York. When I say New York, what comes to mind for you? What word or words describe New York?
First one was crazy.
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 In the sense of energy, right? In the sense of getting things done, in the sense of movement. Like New York is hustle. New York is like go, go, go. We got places to go. We got money to make. We got things to do. Let's go. That's New York. And for 24 years of my life, I lived in New York. So that's very much in me. When I started to make some money, I said, where is the best place on earth that I can think about? Like if I were to imagine ideal in the United States, what comes to mind? The first city that came to mind in that time in 2019 was San Diego.
Interesting.
San Diego is peace. San Diego is serenity. San Diego is the present moment is beautiful just the way it is. And you don't need to do anything. You don't need to hustle to achieve what you want to achieve. And for 9 months, or a year, I learned meditation. I learned yoga. I was also working out and making money, but I was also in a much different energy. Started reading Eckhart Tolle, started to really get in touch with what is going on here. And I built this presence muscle and this ability to be patient because every moment is perfect the way it is. So when I think about where I live right now, Austin, and I think about who I am as a person, it is both in the middle of New York and San Diego. It is peace, but it is also, we got shit to do. We got one life and let's live it to the best of our abilities. So you want to know how I've become impatient with actions and very patient with results? It's because I'm living in the middle, mentally and physically, of New York and San Diego.
You know, when I listen to you, I think it's so respectable. And it's the thing that comes through is like being like a work in progress, just iterating, just getting better over time. And you speak to it even there with like, you started with that kind of hustle and that energy that's like built in. But then you learned like the presence and the calmness to kind of augment that. And so I think always for people, so often we see the end result, right? I see when I'm watching sports, I'm seeing Tom Brady throwing the touchdown pass in the Super Bowl to win it in the fourth quarter. I'm seeing LeBron take the buzzer beater. And it's like, wow, this person, right? That they can do this. It's amazing. It captures our imagination. But that's not where they started. And even with you right now, right? Like you've built a good following on Instagram. You've built a big following on Twitter. Even just the people that like you and just love your content and love what you're doing and support your journey. And it's incredible to see. But I'm sure, in fact, I'm certain it did not start that way. And so I want to go back to the beginning and where it started. Talk to me about Danny when he just started this shit out.
In what part of my life, right? Like, it's funny that it's fascinating that in one sense, you both said that, you know, I'm a work in progress and also like, look at what you have accomplished up to this point, right? Because both are true. Like everything you've said, I'm like thinking about, this is just the beginning. You know, this is, the work hasn't even started yet, you know? So that's one thing. But who was I in the beginning? Who was I? I mean, is the beginning 2020? Is the beginning 1995? Is the beginning 2010? Like, it is so interesting how framing a story is so dependent on where the beginning actually is. I can tell you that the beginning is 2010. And it started when I had a Knicks blog. Or I could say it started in 2009 when I'm 14, 13 years old and I have a time management blog and I read about Gary Vaynerchuk. Or I could say, you know, it actually started in 1995 when my parents had me as a child. Or you could say it started in 2020 when the podcast began. And I finished meditating. Or you could say it could start in 2019 when I started meditating. Right? So like the beginning, what is the beginning? Right? It's like the beginning maybe it's like when my parents met, or it might be when my parents were born, or it might be like I'm a product of so much and so many moments. I'm a product of 13 billion years coming to this moment. And you are too. And that's why this moment is perfect the way it is. And so it's interesting, like talking about the beginning and what is the beginning, because people will talk about the beginning, but there's so much that goes beyond the beginning that it's like, dude, this moment is crazy. And it really, who knows where it started.
Yeah. You know one thing actually, and let's talk about the Andy Frisella moment. One thing I love that you did is you went, so actually, you know what? Let me know, where is it that Andy films? Like, what's the state?
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis. Okay. So you went with your friend Hunter, right?
Yes.
And he was almost like documenting the behind the scenes. And some of the footage that you got from that was like sick, right? And it's interesting because one of the things that I've been doing in the last few weeks, I watched Kanye West's Genius documentary again. And so it's interesting when you say, when is the beginning? It's such a good point, right? It's all based on context and perspective. But I think about the beginning of that documentary, I'm like, what was the beginning in that piece of content, in that realm? And it was the introduction to Coodie, who was like his videographer who was documenting. And I think they had just moved to New York. And it's an interesting question that you pose, which is like, why did you choose that as the beginning? There's so many beginning moments for Kanye as an artist that it could have been the first time he like picked up an instrument or started producing. There's so many things it could have been when he was born and like his early childhood moments, but they chose that. And so I know someone like you just think long term, you play long games. And so say that you're no longer 27 or 28, you're like 80 and they're doing the documentary on your life. And you have to think about that first scene, the introducing Coodie, your videographer, and I think with Kanye as well, he had just moved to New York to like get his music career off the ground. That was the beginning of his documentary. What would be the beginning of yours?
I started to meditate in 2019 because that was the first moment that I was aware. And that was the first moment I realized I could actually change if I understood what I was thinking and the ways in which I was showing up in the world. I look at my life in two parts, the first 24 years and the last 3 or 4, which is when I started to meditate. The meditation was the key piece. I started meditating a week before I started doing 75 Hard, right? And 75 Hard is the program that changed my life. And if I think about what is responsible for all of this, what will be responsible for the next, hopefully, decade, 2 decade, 3 decade, 4 decade, 5 decade, what is going to be the reason why I elevate the consciousness of humanity? It's because I started to meditate. And so that's why it's the most important thing that I talk about, going inward. And it's the most important thing I think about because that is the beginning of who you see today. The person who is for the first time aware of his own thoughts, his own actions, and the way he was showing up in the world.
Why is that? Why is it so meaningful to you?
I can't think of a better thing to do on this earth than to help other people become more peaceful with their own minds and help other people live a better life. Like, if I could think about all the possibilities for things I could do and the things I could accomplish, to me, the best thing is become at peace myself and help other people become at peace as well. And meditation is the kernel that allowed that to happen for me for the first time. And so I posit, I ask the question, if other people also went down that journey, what could happen? And what type of ripple could occur if more people went inward and started to become self-aware of the way they were showing up in the world? I followed Gary Vaynerchuk when I was 13 years old in 2009. And I would say to myself, how the hell does this guy come across with so much love, so much empathy, so much understanding? And it just didn't click for how I could also do that. And then I started to meditate 10 years later. And I was like, oh, I get it. He's incredibly self-aware. He understands himself at a deep level. He's willing to give himself grace for when he messes up. And he's his own biggest cheerleader. Oh, wow. I am now feeling that myself too. Gary Vaynerchuk might have been born with it. He's never meditated a day in his life. I think he said he's meditated twice. So he's born. But I built that for myself. And if I built that, then I know other people can too.
You know what's interesting? I actually remember talking about this with a guest recently, Nate Jones. and we were talking about, he's like a bit older than us, maybe like in his early 40s. And he's a guest that I feel, you've probably had this as well. Certain guests, they have like a wisdom to them.
Definitely.
Like they speak, when I speak with like energy and intensity because I'm trying to get at it. They're like, they already got to it and then reflected and are talking from that perspective. And that was very much where he was coming from. And we were talking about, he had this tweet. He was talking about like young men and finding purpose and the need to like problem solve and have a purpose. And I've heard it in different forms and I've seen it, which is like almost like a general like malaise or like almost like an apathy. And even you just sitting here in front of me, it clicks to me straight away that you have like that, you have that energy about what you do. Something that can't be faked or just acted out. Like it just comes from you. It just emanates, right? That you've found your thing. And so I'm curious for someone that's listening, that they haven't found the thing, that when they talk about it, they talk with the energy that you're coming at it with. They haven't found that thing that it's easy for them to do. They get energy from it. You don't even have to be motivated. Motivated isn't even a word for it. If you almost had to reverse engineer that process of finding your thing, how can people get to that point?
The biggest thing for me was to ask myself, what was I doing as a child? And then I started to realize, oh, I was writing blogs when I was 13 and 14 and 15, and no one told me to do it, right? It was just like innate, like I need to write a blog. So I'm 25 years old and the pandemic happens and I go back home to live with my parents and I'm like, what was I doing as a child? Oh, that's right. I was writing. Okay, I was writing a blog. All right, let me do that. So in March of 2020, I go up on Google and I see, oh wow, DannyMiranda.com is available as a domain. To me, that was so exciting because I never owned my domain as my own name. And I was like, all right, like DannyMiranda.com is available. Now let me write a blog on it like I was doing as a child. And so I started writing, and from the writing of the blog, I started to, have more joy and get more excitement. And when I had more joy and excitement, I then was like, who wants to talk on the phone? I wanted to spread that joy and excitement. And then once I spread the joy and excitement, people were like, wow, I really enjoyed that conversation. And I was like, I enjoyed it as well. And what is a recorded conversation? A recorded conversation is just a podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm basically doing what I was doing for those people in June, July, August, now more, because those people enjoyed it and I enjoyed it too. So how that started though, was I asked myself, what was I doing as a kid? What was I doing for the sake of doing it? When no one was judging me and I didn't think about anyone else. And so that didn't turn out to be the thing, right? Writing a blog wasn't the thing that you know me for in this moment. But if I didn't write that blog, I never would have started the podcast.
You know what comes to mind? I remember someone said this to me. They said, nowadays, everything is like too strategic. I think it's because we're too aware of what everyone else is doing. Like on Instagram, you see so much of everyone else's moves that you start to think about like, we're so obsessed with like positioning. Like, oh, I need to be friends with this guy because he could probably introduce me to this person and then they could introduce me to this. Or I need to work at this company so that 5 years down the line, I can go to this company and then get to here. Everything is so strategic and positioned, which is why what you're saying is so powerful, because as kids, we're not strategic. We play, like if it was for me back home, we play football because that's just what we do. We just wanted to do that in that moment. There's like a wonder, there's like a childlike wonder to just doing the thing. And so I love that advice because it's like, just get back to that. Like start with the love. And it even goes back to one of the first things you said to me, which is you need to be able to do it for at least 10 years. Because that's almost like, that's the first bar, the first filter of like, do you actually love the thing? It's difficult to do something for that duration of time unless you love it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that people say to me over and over again is like, what you do and who you are is so pure, right? That comes across to people enough separate times where I note it. And I think that the reason for that is because I'm just in touch with what I was doing as a child, where it was pure. And I'm just following that. And there is no ulterior motive for me coming on this podcast. There is no ulterior motive when I'm interviewing somebody. I'm just like, I want to learn more about you. And this is the questions that I would ask if I was a child. And people resonate with that because it's coming from love. And it's a pure, frequent, like it is real. And so, yeah, in a world where we do things so that we can be seen a certain way and appear, it's like, if you just are doing things for yourself and you don't care what other people think of you, it leads to other people thinking highly of you. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. Yeah. No, the pure intention. I think that's so important. One of the people, and I think it was about a year ago, that I really I read his book, I watched a lot of his interviews, was Will Smith. And I know he's someone who's had like a lot of coaches, and he's spoken about like spirituality and like therapy and just the process of becoming more self-aware. But obviously he had the thing with like Chris Rock, which is like the guy who like meditates and like talks about spirituality. Like, why is he going on stage and like slapping this guy, right? In front of the world as well. Like, it just seems unhinged. It seems in contradiction to how he is. And it reminded me of like, life is like kind of a journey. And so what starts as a pure intention can deviate. And so I'm curious for you, like, as you're on this journey, are there moments where you start to waver, where like as the lights get brighter and brighter and the guests get bigger and bigger, that strategic element is now more coming into it, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe I can get this guest to get, like, I'm curious about those moments of wavering, because we all have them.
Yeah, no, it's a great point and great question. And it's so interesting how those moments seem to come when I'm least in touch with myself. Like, I'll notice that there's something that I need to do, right? Or like something that I know in my heart I'm not doing that I should be doing, just from like a personal life standpoint. And then because it's a difficult conversation, or I actually don't want to go there in my personal life, I noticed that on the podcast, I'm more likely to be like, to ask questions to get better clips, as opposed to asking questions that I actually want, because I'm not as in touch with myself. So I think it's interesting to me that the more that I meditate, the more that I go inward, the more that I'm really in touch with who I am, the less I am willing to compromise on the purity of the mission. But the more away from the meditation of myself I go, and it shows up in other areas, the more I'm willing to waver. Oh, like, let me just try to get good clips. Oh, let me just try to make some money here doing something that I don't really want to do. And it's funny how that happens. And I'm sure, and it's such an interesting point about, you can set an intention, but then when you're actually in it, it's way different. What you envision, and that's why I talk about doing it for 10 years, because it's like, what you think in your head it's going to be like to run a podcast is way different than what it actually is like. And if you're doing it because you want to appear to other people as the type of person who has a podcast, it's not going to work. It's only going to work if it comes from a pure place. And it's interesting. Like, how do I figure out when I am deviating from that intention of purity? Is when I notice there's things on my mind that I need to do. Things that, the conversation that is difficult to have. The thing in my heart that is like, oh shit, like you tell your friend that, you know, like, actually, like, I don't think we should spend as much time together, right? Like, that's a difficult thing to say to somebody if it's been a friend for a long time and that person is draining energy from you, right? So it's stuff like that I notice takes me away from the mission of purity, and it funnels into the podcast.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because even your bio is the first line go inward to find the truth.
Yeah.
And you've said it even so many times in this conversation, the self-awareness, the ability to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I want to ask you something interesting about that, because I always think whenever even I'm just speaking to someone and they say something to me, my mind automatically goes like, why? Like, why do they think like that? Because there's kind of a story to everything. There's like a background to everything. And one of the things for me, because there was a very vivid moment in my life, and I remember it vividly, where I was like, okay, I need to start meditating. Like I'd always heard about it. I'd always heard these like really successful people be like, the secret to my success is meditation. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do what they said. And then like I tried it and I would just fall asleep. And I was like, this shit do not work at all. But then there was a period in my life when I really needed it. And that's when it clicked. And it's interesting. I think part of the reason, if I was just being really honest, that I really love meditation is to do with control. And the reason I say control is meditation is almost like the ultimate like self-control. You just become you're so aware of your thoughts, because things in the world, things are always happening to us. There's all of these experiences and stimulus, and they can kind of knock us off kilter. People like that are working. I remember I had this at my job sometimes. Sometimes you'll say something that you didn't want to say in a meeting, or you'll have a bad interaction. Throws you off the whole day. Meditation, it's like more just calm. It's more just quiet in your mind. And at times I think, and this is something that I'm like also trying to be careful of, is trying to almost be too perfect, trying to be like too self-controlled. I think a lot of things exist in balance, right? There's a balance between going inward and also living in the world. The people that go like inward to the ultimate degree are like in caves somewhere, just like by themselves. And so I'm curious for you, like, first of all, for me, I guess it was control. It was self-control. For you, if you had to almost put like a word to it, that you were like, okay, this is what meditation gave me, what would you say that is? So that's part one. And then part two, with the go inward to find the truth, I almost wonder like, what is the flip side of that, right? Because if you do anything too much, it becomes to your detriment. And so what is the balancing point of going inward? But let's start with your thoughts on like what's motivated you with meditation.
The word that comes to mind with what meditation gave me is love. Love for myself, love for the present moment, love for people around me, because they're dealing with their own mind issues that they don't even know they're dealing with. Because I know because I was living in that reality for a long time, and it's a very difficult reality. So it gave me love. And then to answer your second question about, could you go too far? Is that the question? Could you go too far with going inward?
Could you go too far?
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I mean, like, what comes to mind is like, could you go too far going outward, right? Like what's the opposite of going inward to find the truth? Is like, go outward to find what's false. And if you want to know that to be true, that going outward gives you what's false, just look at the people who have gone so far in that realm. Okay, so this is really exciting for me because people know or believe that monks are like the happiest people, right? People also know the billionaires and the most famous people are sometimes the most depressed. Not always, but you would never say like a monk is depressed. Like very few people can think of that archetype.
Yeah.
A lot of people can find archetypes of famous and quote unquote successful people, famous and rich and people who have won the external game, but they're unhappy. And so it's funny that like people say, I don't want to go to a cave. I don't want to be a monk. and pursue external gain. But the external gain, the archetype is people who are unsuccessful, meaning people who are not at peace with their mind. And we, it's like we do that as like a trigger for ourselves because we're like, I don't want to be in a monk. I don't want to be in a cave. And I do that too. But those people are way more successful than the people who are rich and famous. And we currently, in our current paradigm in the West, we have it all wrong. And that is a scary reality. And it's also scary when it comes at your identity, it comes at your friends, it comes at everything you've learned up to this point. And that was the realization that was so difficult for me to really sit with. Of like, damn it, everything I've learned is false. Like, that's hard. And so, yeah, it's really cool because I've never thought about that before, that people will say about monks that I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to go that far. And that I understand and I relate to that. But they won't say, I don't want to be rich and famous because I don't want to go that far. Even though that's a much more scary proposition.
It brings the question of like, what are we optimizing for? And sometimes what you think you're optimizing for is not actually what you're optimizing for. And what I mean is a lot of people will be like, oh, I just want to be like successful. But then what does that mean? Like, does that mean, and that's the point you're making. Does that mean happiness? Does that just mean material wealth, like wealth? And if it is wealth, then what is the motivator behind that? And so you said something very interesting, which is like the things that we're going after and what we've been taught in the West is a lie.
Yeah.
And so here's where my mind goes with that. And I felt it a lot being in America. There's a consumerism. There's just a material want to just have things, just have possessions and resources. So if that is a lie and that is the wrong thing to pursue, what is the right thing, says Danny Miranda?
Peace of mind. The ability to sit with nothing and to be not only content, but joyous to be in your body and mind. And that doesn't mean that you need to stop going after what is material. If that helps bring you a little more joy and peace, that's great. But if it starts from the places, I am insufficient, and therefore I'm going to chase things to help me feel sufficient, I'm here to tell you, go chase it, but also know that that is not what is actually going to solve the hole in your heart. What is actually going to solve the hole in your heart is looking at why, looking at yourself, sitting with yourself, and asking questions to you that might be uncomfortable. Why do I feel when somebody says something, I feel upset about myself? Why do I feel unworthy? What is in my heart right now that I'm not actually doing? Looking and doing those things are actually what is going to give you the peace. And that is actually what is the most beautiful thing you could ever do, is like find yourself, find what is actually on your mind. There's like a conversation right now that most people who are listening need to have, either with themselves or with somebody that they love. And they're not doing it because they're scared and fearful of that. And so because of that, they'll chase money. They'll chase external success. They'll chase fame. They'll chase likes on social media. And it's like they would have a way different energy of doing all those things if they had that conversation with themselves or someone they love.
We're distracted. That's almost what it is. We're distracted. And I think even the way that the world is set up, it's set up so that we can continue to be distracted.
Of course.
It's like you can spend day after day and never have to be with yourself. And I think we've all had moments of that. And it catches you in small ways, right? You'll be washing the dishes, but listening to something. Or washing the dishes and watching something at the same time. You could literally fill up every single second of your day with some form of entertainment. And you know what? It's a common theme, I think, that I've seen in conversations is just a need to reconnect. And the funny thing is obviously like as humans, we've developed so much, like all of the technology and all of the conveniences that we have. But the greatest things available to us, they existed at the very beginning. being in nature, being able to, and I think I think the pandemic really demonstrated it, because when we were all like locked down and inside, people were like going on hikes or like learning how to like do cooking or like just things that we've been doing for millennia since the beginning, right? Just simple tasks. I'm curious, what was, because you spoke about 2019, 2020, what was that period of the pandemic like for you? Because it feels like that was like a transformative time.
Transformative in every way. It was starting in May of 2020. I meditated 60 minutes every day until December of 2020. It's so fascinating, right? That the thing that, if you're listening to this podcast and you know me for my own podcast, the podcast started in June or July of 2020, like the ideas for it. And it actually started in August. I started recording in September. I launched. And so if you think about what came before that, that is just meditating every day for 60 minutes, letting thoughts go. You know, I was doing Naval's 60-day meditation challenge. And then I loved it so much, I just kept doing it. And it was just like sitting with the thoughts, watching them go. And within the first 7 or 14 days of the meditation challenge, 60 minutes, I came to this realization that for the past 8 years, I've been holding on to this situation where a kid pushed me into a locker senior year of high school. And I was like, oh my God, that had been in my brain for 8 years. And because things pop up in this meditation, you can't hide from yourself anymore. And when I forgave myself and him for doing that, like forgave myself for holding on to it and forgave him for doing what he did, I was so much more free and so much more at peace. And I was like, wow, that is a fascinating thing. How many other things am I holding on to? How many other, and it wasn't like every meditation session I came across a traumatic event that I had, but it's interesting that when you sit with nothing, what comes up exactly? Like the situations that come up, the situations you're holding on to, the random things, quote unquote, random life experiences you've had that you don't even know are there, that are shaping your behavior and actions. Like that kid pushing me into a locker was definitely shaping my behaviors and actions. And I had no idea because I just never stopped to look at myself to that level. And there's something very important that happens, you know, from 20 minutes of meditation to 60 minutes, like from the 20-minute mark to the 60-minute mark. It's like I was doing 20-minute meditations prior for 6 months before starting in September 2019. And that gave me a good foundation so that when May started, May 2020, I was able to go deeper on myself. But I was like, wow, there's a huge difference here. And I'm able to, because I think like the first 20 minutes are just like you getting used to what the voice says. And then you're like, oh, I don't have to live with this voice, or I can investigate it more. And you're like much more free to explore what is actually true from the 20 to 60-minute mark is what I've noticed. So yeah, I mean, that is what the pandemic really helped solidify me with, was like, oh wow, going inward really helped create something that you love and are passionate about. Without meditating for 60 minutes, I wouldn't have started the podcast.
You know what's interesting actually, and I've never thought about it in this way, but just listening to you, it's kind of become clear to me. The thing that might be the most dangerous for our society might be the fact that I think most people walk around not knowing themselves. And the reason I say it's probably the most dangerous is there's this quote from Charlemagne the God, who's like obviously super huge in the hip hop world and just like as a media personality, he's huge. And he has this thing I remember him always saying, because I used to listen to his podcast growing up. He said, hurt people hurt people. And I think it's like when certain things happen to you and you haven't processed it, which is the key part, because fucked up shit happens to everyone. But when you haven't processed it, it comes out in small ways. And you're almost on like this, and we've all done it. We've all done things that we regret. And maybe at that moment, you didn't know why you did it, but it probably has something to do with your past and something that happened. And it goes back to hurt people hurt people. And you go on almost like this war path of like just destruction. And we've seen people like this in our life, that they just go from situation to situation, and it's destructive in their like romantic relationships, in friendships, in business relationships, in the workplace. It's like they're on a war path. And so it really illustrates why it's so important to spend time with yourself. That said, and I even alluded to it earlier on, spending time with yourself, especially in the beginning, when you're plugged into the world and you're distracted, it feels very difficult. And a lot of people, like I did, they'll start meditation and then quit. And so if I'm someone who's listening to this podcast and I'm like, okay, I want to start meditation and I just need someone to give me like, there's so much different kind of instructions on how you should do it. Some people are like, just sit down and just like stare at a wall. Some people do like the mantras. Some people do like guided meditation. They'll listen to someone else saying something and they'll just sit there. If you were going to be, for the person that just wants to get going and just stick at it and start to build the habit, how would you tell them to start with meditation?
I would say you need two things. One is you need some form of external accountability. The reason why you quit is because you believe that, one, it's not going to have an effect, and two, you believe that you meditating isn't impacting anything. And having the external accountability of somebody you respect and admire is enough for you to say, you know what, that person expects me to show up for myself. And so I don't believe in myself, but I want to show up for that person. And that was a huge thing for me. It's like my friend Tej Dosa, he was somebody who I didn't want to let down. And so I didn't text him at the end of every day that I was meditating, but looking back, that would have been beneficial for definitely the first 6 months, because in that 6-month period of September to March, I started and then stopped and started and stopped. And I had a consistent 90-day streak going on and where I had realizations, but the external accountability would have been huge. And then the other thing is like, make it easy for yourself. If you make it easy for yourself, you can do it so that you're excited to do it and it's helpful for you. And then the third thing I'll say is like, you got to commit for at least 90 days. If you can't commit, after 90 days, you can say, this modality, this way of doing it doesn't work for me. But if you haven't done it for 90 days straight, I don't believe you in when you say it doesn't work. And that's the mistake I think a lot of people make, is one, they probably start with like 60 minutes and they don't have 60 minutes to give every day. At that time, they don't believe they do. And even though, like, if we looked at the phone, like, you're giving more attention to the phone or the computer than you would yourself. Which, if you really stop to think about that, like, that's its own separate topic. That's crazy. Is like, we know attention is valuable. Why? Because a lot of people make money off our attention, but we don't even have the courage or the awareness to give the attention to ourselves. Like, that's crazy. So I could go down so many rabbit holes with that, but it's like, with somebody just starting out, you need to commit for 90 days. 90 days. And one example that James Clear has in Atomic Habits, which is great, is take a jar and put like 90 coins in the jar, and then have a second jar or a cup. And every day you do the habit that you want, you move the coin from one cup to the other cup, so you can see the visual representation of what you're actually doing. I've never done that myself, but it just seems to make sense to me. And it's like, you also need to do it long enough where it will make an impact. If you meditate for one minute a day, that's great. I don't know if you do 1 minute of push-ups a day for 90 days, that's going to actually make an impact and change your behavior. Because it's like, that's not enough stimulus. For some people, it might be, but for other people, doing 1 minute of push-ups every day is not going to actually make a meaningful difference on their life. And therefore, they might say, this doesn't work. Because the stimulus wasn't high enough. So my suggestion for people, if they've never meditated, is 15 minutes minimum. 20 would be great. And even 60 minutes would be even better. But it's like, start with something that seems reasonable to you and that you're excited about. If you're excited about 60, do 60. But you need, 60 to 90 days minimum to actually see a change.
You know, it's interesting that one of the things you said is that there's like significant things that happen from 20 minutes in the meditation to 60 minutes.
Yep.
And I think for me personally, I've always only done like 20, 25 minutes would probably be like my max.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever done like 60 minutes. So I need to try that.
Isn't that crazy though? Like people think to me that it's wild that I'm meditating for 60 minutes. And I'm saying it's wild that people think it's wild to meditate for 60 minutes. Because it's like, what do you mean? You can't spend an hour with yourself every day? Like that to me is like, that's a sign that something's wrong. If you cannot actually sit with what is on your mind for 60 minutes, it means that there's something you need to do that you don't want to do. It means there's some situation that's holding you back. And I'm empathetic towards it. But why isn't that normal? Why is it normal to just be with ourselves? Because we've been conditioned that ourselves are not whole. Because that's how you buy things in a society.
That's what I was going to say.
It's like you buy things because you feel like you're not whole. And when you feel whole, you're very dangerous to the society that we've created because you don't need anything from anyone, which means you're acting with pure intentions and love and want to create because you're already whole. Because you're like, what do you do when all things are good and it's easy and life is whole just the way it is? You start to create things. You start to build things. You start to be like, oh, let's have a great conversation. Let's put out this podcast. And you're coming at it from the place of purity. So you can see how it all is connected. And listen, I'm not perfect, right? Like I want to like set the record straight. What I've done, what the state that I'm currently living in is not something that for the past 3 years I've been living in for every moment. And that's okay. That's human, right? To build a habit and then come back to it and then forget that the habit was helpful in the first place. But it's like, if we can nudge more and more people to that place of peace and presence and serenity and looking at themselves, even when it's difficult to, and having the conversations with themselves and other people, like we are creating a more whole world, WHOLE, filling the holes inside of ourselves to live with more love and compassion to the world around us.
It makes complete sense why you said love, like why that's the word. Because when you don't need anything, then it's like, why do you do something? You're just going to gravitate to the things that you love. And it goes back to the purity of the intention, right? That is, I think probably love and hate are like the most pure intentions.
And where does hate come from? Hate comes from fear, right? Scared. I'm scared that the situation isn't unfolding the way I want to. So I need to control it. And I need to like put out some anger to the world or to myself to get me to do the thing that I want to do. And it's like, I really look at love and fear as the two dichotomies of life. And that to me came about when I read A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And she posits that love is what we all are. And then it's fear that gets put on top of it. I was wondering for so long, how come my yoga teacher, Tej Dosa, and Eckhart Tolle are saying the same things? I had no idea for like 6 to 12 months. And I read A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, and I'm like, oh, wow. They are all acting and speaking in the language of love. And everything else that they are saying is just because they are filtering the world through the lens of love. A lot of other people are filtering through the lens of fear. And I request, the listener, you, to like just go throughout the world and be like, what am I consuming right now? Like either a conversation you're having, a situation on the park, an actual podcast or a video or an article, and ask yourself, is this coming from fear or is this coming from love?
You know what I was just thinking as you were, because it's a powerful thing. And I was just thinking to the person that's listening to that, what would stop them from doing that? And here's where my mind goes, is that some people, I think environment is incredibly important. And some people, their environment, it doesn't even let them get to that place. I think about people that grow...
I'm going to cut you off because it's not true. We think it's true, but that's not actually true.
Yeah.
And I know that to be the case because I've read accounts of people in the Holocaust who are able to maintain peace even in the worst of circumstances. Those people could have said, my environment is so bad and I cannot, and it's unimaginable for me to be in that. But it's like they said to themselves, no, I'm in control of my mind. And they could do difficult things to me. They could do inhumane things to me. They could act in so much fear and hatred, but they don't get control over your own mind. So we are so quick, so often say that our environment impacts us, and it definitely does. And I feel that so deeply. And so I try to put myself in environments that help me be the person that I want to be. But that does not mean that the environment controls your mind, because it does not. So I just want to make that clear so people can understand, because you could read Viktor Frankl, you could read Eva Edith Eger, and you could see that they were in really, really like horrible situations and environments, but they maintained peace over their own mind, meaning that the perpetrators of the crimes had no power over them.
It's powerful. I almost wonder, like, I almost think if you spoke to that person, I wonder what they would have said, like, because I think especially when you're in those extreme circumstances, it can go one of two ways, right? Because you hear the story about the person who has the incredibly peaceful mind. You also hear the people in prison or in the Holocaust that they'll just go insane.
Yeah.
Or they'll just be incredibly bitter. I remember even the Creed 3, it's weird that this came to my mind, but Creed 3 in the movie, the guy goes to prison and his way of dealing with it was vengeance. When I get out, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And so it'd be interesting even to ask the person that chose love, what motivated that? Like, what was the switch? I don't even think it's a switch that was flicked, but like, what were the habits? And I think the reason I say that is because I just think there's so many people that are like, they're just not happy with how like their life is going. And I find that there's usually something which starts to turn it around. And if we could just almost give like a framework and like, okay, here's at least, because here's the things I find helpful for me is like, when I'm lost, it's helpful when someone just gives you like that direction, like just focus on this, this, and this for this period of time. And that at least gets you running.
Yeah.
At least the momentum starts to get in your favor. And so if you were speaking to that person who right now, and you know what, I love that you actually interrupted and you said that you can change it, because that's important for that person to hear. But you tell them that you can change it. I want to reverse my life around. I'm drawing on so many threads here.
Please.
I'm drawing on so many threads. I remember even seeing an Alex Hormozy post when he was speaking about this guy that he ran into, I think going out of the grocery store.
Avante.
Is that the name?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the guy was like, I think he's like a single parent, and he had just had like a young child, and he's working at the grocery store earning like minimum wage. And he goes to Alex, he's like, how do I just change my life around? Like, how do I do it? And Alex gives him like this, like, it was fucking amazing. He was like, do this, 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 and this. If you were going to think of like your version of that, if someone comes to you, if I'm Avante and I come to you and I'm like, mate, like my life right now is like, it's not going how I want. And honestly, I'm just like overwhelmed. Like there's just too much. And what are the things, the three things that I can just focus on? And you said 90 days. What are the three things I can just focus on for these 90 days, which is, it's just going to put me in a better spot financially, in terms of my mental, in terms of my physical, wherever you want to take it. Like, it's just going to put me in a better spot.
Yeah. So it's like move the body, move the mind, move the soul, right? So you're going to meditate for 20 minutes a day. You're going to do some form of exercise for hopefully 20 to an hour a day, 20 minutes to an hour a day. And you're going to do something that feeds your soul. Like, I believe that if you create the conditions for your mind to be at peace, your soul to be chasing something that it wants and really feels at a deep level like that it was put on this earth to do, and your body is moving and you're sweat. Like the reason why you feel overwhelmed is because you feel outside of your circumstances. You feel like you can't control your circumstances. You feel like your circumstances are controlling you. That's an incorrect belief. And the way you realize that that is an incorrect belief is you start making progress on your body and mind. And thus it unlocks your soul's mission, right? So that's been the case for me, where I started working out. I started moving my mind, and my mind, like really understanding what is going on in my mind. And then it unlocked the soul purpose, the soul mission, which has manifested in this moment as the podcast. So that's what I would give. That's what's worked for me. And yeah, I would suggest people to try that out.
Yeah. You know what? Here's where I want to end. To the person that's listening to you, I would be like, this guy's like a machine. I'd be like, he's doing the meditation. He's putting out episodes at a prolific pace. Like he's just going at it. How many episodes have you done so far?
375 is the one I posted today.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that shit super fast as well. 375 episodes. You've been doing this for like 2.5 years, right?
Yeah, coming up on 3 years in September.
3 years. And I know like one of the people obviously that you look at is Rogan. That guy's been doing it 10 years plus in the game, thousands. I think he just did a 2000th or something episode.
That's right.
I'm curious, when you reflect, Danny Miranda, 10 years in the game, 2000 episodes. What do you think the setting is like? Like, just like, I don't even know. Do you even think about that?
Madison Square Garden, baby. We're going to sell out Madison Square Garden and hopefully tour around the country. That's the mission. That's the plan. And that's the vision that I see. And then, you know, after that, maybe I'll do something else, right? Like Arnold wasn't in bodybuilding forever. He had Mr. Olympia is what he wanted, and that's what he got. And so I don't know if that is what is in my future, but I know I will work so damn hard to make that a reality. And if I don't, that's okay too. But I'm not going to stop until I'm on the stage at Madison Square Garden and 19,763 people are there with me. Because the amount of joy and energy that would bring me is just so remarkable and so exciting for me. So yeah, I think it's very important to align yourself with a vision that excites you, that gives you goosebumps, that is just so out of this world that maybe you could even see it in this world.
What is it about Madison Square Garden?
Every single season the Knicks played, I would go in to the Madison Square Garden to see like the manifestation of excellence in the NBA. And, you know, I was fortunate to go to a couple games each season, and it was like, wow, I'd love to be a player someday. But I quickly realized, like, I'm never going to play in the NBA. I was cut from my middle school basketball team in 7th grade. So it's like, how do I create that for myself in some way? And let it be known that the vision didn't come before the podcast. It didn't come before the meditation. It didn't come before knowing myself. The vision came when I asked myself, I love doing this. I could see myself doing this forever. What is the form of this that makes me so excited, that would fill me with such joy and would be so unbelievable to me that it could inspire other people to also root for me as well? So yeah, that's how the podcast vision came to life. But it's important for people to note the order, because if I had set that as the vision before actually starting the podcast, or before knowing that the podcast was something that I enjoyed doing for the sake of doing it, it wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah. Okay, I want this to be the final one, which is, you said it's almost like Madison Square Garden is the arena of excellence.
Yeah.
When you said that, it clicked in my mind, because it's people might not see this unless you're sitting in this chair and you're asking the questions and you're coming on every week and you're really putting it out there. This is like a craft, at least the way I see it as a craft. And so when you're in Madison Square Garden, it's almost the validation of like mastery within the craft. The people that go in Madison Square Garden are at the top of their field. They have dedicated, that means something, that they got to be on that stage. So that's the macro. That's the macro in terms of the macro kind of motivation, dream, goal. Here's the other thing, right? So there's the macro, then there's the micro. And I think even in my life up until this point, and it's so early, I've had these great macro achievements which have been meaningful, and I've loved it, and it's been incredible. But actually, a lot of the time, I would say the micro things have been more powerful to me. It's been more powerful to me when like I look in my parents' eyes and I see genuine pride and genuine belief that what I say I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do. My mum believing in me, my brothers and sisters, like even seeing me as someone that they could follow or like look to emulate some of the things that I've done. And so you gave us the macro. Madison Square Garden, arenas packed. They're listening to you, and maybe it's a guest. Maybe it's Rogan. Let's put that into the universe.
Can you imagine?
That'd be crazy. But what is the other side? What is the micro?
The micro to me is to help myself learn more about myself and the world around me. The micro is to raise the consciousness of the world. The micro is to help people in every moment I'm in. The micro is to show people love in every moment to the best of my abilities, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything to sell out Madison Square Garden. It means something because it helps give everyone in that arena, on that night, and myself a little more love. And so what I'm doing is way beyond and way different than Madison Square Garden. It's just the vision that gets people excited. But to me, when I'm in a podcast with somebody, when I'm interviewing them, I'm asking them questions to help unlock a piece of their soul so that I can show them how I view them so that they could better understand themselves. And doing that brings me so much joy. Doing that fills me with an energy that I can't even explain to you, because it's like in that moment, that person is getting more in touch with themselves. And so that's the micro for really what I'm doing. And that's the more important piece than selling out Madison Square Garden.
Danny Miranda, folks. Absolute fucking machine, man. Didn't disappoint. That's a wrap, man.
Thank you so much for spending the time, for asking the questions. It's a beautiful conversation.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel. We're having fire conversations every week on the podcast. Before we end the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Free Agency. What if I told you there is a good chance you're leaving money on the table in your career? It would kind of annoy you a bit, right? Well, Free Agency aims to stop that. They represent and manage talent in the tech industry. Here's how they do it. First, they provide you with a dedicated talent agent. Think about this as your career quarterback. They understand you and your career goals. Based on that understanding, they bring you suitable interviews at top firms. You focus on smashing the interview, and together with their network, research, negotiation expertise, they will make sure you get a top of market salary. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency.